Because she's a liar, she's a cheater.
You have undeniable proof on your side.
When he had nowhere to go at, when you had nowhere to go at, you came home to me.
That right there, I did ask her to have my child, but
I was with you. I met him, his mother was a bus driver at my school. He came to my house. I was home by myself. We had sex the very first time. He moved in with me because he had nowhere to go because them two were on the outs again. So he moves in, me and Mr. Pippen had sex again. Asked me to have his first child. Wow. He had went and told her because he was taking my hair out. I had him braids in too.
Yes, so close that you would let him take your braids out, not using protection.
right. The time around she got pregnant, I was not here I wasn't in Greenville at the time when she got pregnant.
I have the proof from y'all if you want to see.
I would like to see the proof. Jerome, please pass that to me.
This courtroom case unfolds under the authority of Judge Lauren Lake, where multiple adults arrive carrying years of emotional conflict, unresolved relationships, and unanswered questions about paternity, responsibility, and truth. At the center of the court proceedings is a mother seeking accountability, two men disputing biological fatherhood, and children whose futures depend on evidence rather than emotion. What begins as a dispute over a DNA test quickly expands into a complex story about trust, betrayal, and the relationship between law and justice. The court hears from a woman who firmly believes that the man she has brought before the court is the biological father of her children. She explains that her demand is not rooted in revenge or anger but in necessity. She wants stability for her children, clarity for herself, and acknowledgement from the man she says promised her a family. As the case opens, it becomes clear that this is not simply about child support, but about truth, dignity, and the concept of justice in jurisprudence. The defendant, however, arrives with a very different narrative. He insists that there is no possibility he is the father and claims he has already taken a DNA test that proves his innocence. He appears confident, supported by his current partner, and argues that the evidence stage in this divorce-like dispute should end the matter immediately. His position reflects a recurring theme often discussed in the Truth Changes Everything podcast. People enter court believing evidence will protect them, only to realize it may expose deeper truths instead. Judge Lauren Lake carefully listens to both sides, emphasizing that the court is not interested in rumors or assumptions. She reminds everyone present that biology, not belief, determines paternity. The courtroom atmosphere reflects what many describe in DNA test cheating stories: intense emotions, raised voices, and moments where past relationships resurface unexpectedly. Still, the judge insists on order, clarity, and respect for the legal process. As testimony continues, the court learns about overlapping relationships, periods of separation, reconciliations, and intimate encounters that blur timelines. The mother explains that she trusted the defendant completely and believed they were building a future together. She recounts how promises were made during vulnerable moments and how those promises shaped her decisions. Her account echoes stories often heard on platforms like the Relationship Between Law and Justice podcast, where emotional bonds clash with legal realities. The defendant acknowledges a relationship, but insists that timing makes paternity impossible. He introduces documents and references prior testing, arguing that adverse inference in Evidence Act principles should apply if the court questions his earlier DNA results. The discussion shifts to how evidence is collected, handled, and interpreted. Questions arise about whether past testing was reliable or compromised, reinforcing why courts rely on court-ordered tests rather than private arrangements. Witnesses are called, including family members, who describe suspicious behavior surrounding earlier DNA tests. These testimonies introduce doubt and demonstrate why people regret taking a DNA test when motives are unclear. Judge Lauren Lake carefully explains that speculation cannot replace scientific verification. She makes it clear that the court will rely on certified results, not assumptions, reinforcing the authority of the legal system and the Supreme Court child support principles that prioritize the child's best interest. When the DNA results are finally presented, the courtroom experiences a dramatic shift. One child is confirmed not to be biologically related to the defendant, a revelation that stuns some and validates others. The result reflects a painful reality often discussed in adoption stories' full episodes, where biology and parenting do not always align. Emotions overflow as reactions range from relief to heartbreak, highlighting how truth, once revealed, cannot be undone. However, the case does not end there. A second child's paternity is also in question, involving another man who has acted as a father figure. This individual steps forward, explaining his role in the child's life, from attending medical appointments to providing daily care. His testimony brings forward a powerful contrast between biological connection and emotional responsibility, a theme frequently explored in the Game-Changing Attorney podcast when discussing family law outcomes. Judge Lauren Lake reminds everyone that the law recognizes biology, but the court also acknowledges the emotional realities children face. Still, legal determinations must be made. The second DNA test result reverses expectations once again, confirming the biological father to be the original defendant. This outcome underscores why the Truth Changes Everything podcast resonates with so many, because no amount of belief can override verified evidence. With both results revealed, the courtroom shifts from conflict to consequence. Judge Lauren Lake addresses the adults directly, emphasizing that their choices have created instability for innocent children. She speaks about accountability, co-parenting, and the necessity of maturity moving forward. Her words reflect values often discussed in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where personal responsibility becomes the first step toward healing. The judge also highlights how repeated cycles of denial, reconciliation, and mistrust have harmed everyone involved. She urges the parties to seek guidance, referencing resources similar to those discussed in the Divorce Course podcast, which focus on rebuilding communication and prioritizing children over conflict. Her message reinforces that while the court can determine facts, it cannot repair relationships without cooperation. This case illustrates how the evidence stage in divorce case proceedings can uncover more than legal answers. It exposes character, choices, and consequences. The court becomes not just a place of judgment, but a mirror reflecting uncomfortable truths. As Judge Lauren Lake concludes, she reiterates that justice is not about winning or losing, but about accepting reality and acting responsibly within it. In the end, this courtroom story stands as a powerful example of how DNA tests, while scientific, carry emotional weight. They redefine families, alter futures, and force people to confront truths they may have avoided for years. It is a reminder that in the pursuit of justice, evidence speaks louder than emotion, and once the truth is revealed, life must move forward, whether ready or not. As the courtroom proceedings continue, the emotional impact of the DNA results begins to settle in, but the legal and moral questions deepen rather than disappear. Judge Lauren Lake makes it clear that paternity is not just a biological determination. It carries lifelong responsibilities tied to law, ethics, and the welfare of the children involved. The court now shifts its focus from revelation to responsibility, emphasizing how truth reshapes obligations rather than erasing them. The mother reflects on the emotional toll of standing in court and hearing results that alter her understanding of her own family. She speaks about betrayal, confusion, and the burden of being the sole constant presence in her children's lives. Her testimony echoes themes often discussed in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where individuals confront the consequences of past choices while searching for a path forward. The courtroom listens as she explains that her goal was never humiliation, but stability and honesty for her children. The confirmed biological father responds with mixed emotions. While one result brought relief, the second result forces accountability he had long resisted. Judge Lauren Lake addresses him directly, explaining that denial does not eliminate duty. The law, she reminds him, is structured to protect children first, aligning with Supreme Court child support principles that prioritize care over conflict. His reaction reflects a moment commonly seen in DNA test people regret taking scenarios, relief intertwined with regret. Attention then turns to the man who believed himself to be the second child's father and had acted accordingly. He describes forming a genuine bond, stepping into a parental role without legal certainty. His presence raises difficult questions about the relationship between law and justice. While the law recognizes biological ties, justice often acknowledges emotional labor. This tension is frequently explored in adoption stories' full episodes, where love and responsibility exist beyond DNA. Judge Lauren Lake carefully navigates this sensitive territory, clarifying that the court cannot erase emotional bonds, but it must base legal rulings on evidence. She stresses that adverse inference in Evidence Act standards prevent assumptions from replacing verified facts. The court's responsibility is not to reward intention, but to establish truth, even when it disrupts established emotional dynamics. As the discussion continues, patterns of behavior become evident. Overlapping relationships, inconsistent communication, and avoidance of responsibility are laid bare. Judge Lauren Lake highlights how these patterns contribute to chaos and confusion, especially for children. She references broader legal principles tied to the concept of justice in jurisprudence, explaining that justice is not merely punitive, but corrective. The goal is to create clarity where confusion once ruled. The courtroom atmosphere mirrors discussions often found in the Game Changing Attorney podcast, where legal experts examine how family law cases expose deeper societal issues, trust, accountability, and the consequences of avoidance. This case becomes a textbook example of how unresolved personal issues eventually surface in legal settings, where facts replace narratives and outcomes cannot be negotiated through emotion. The judge then addresses co-parenting expectations. She explains that the court's involvement does not end with DNA results. Child support, visitation, and long-term responsibility are legal realities that must be addressed. Her explanation aligns with themes from the Divorce Course podcast, emphasizing structure, boundaries, and communication as essential tools for moving forward. She warns that continued hostility will only create further harm. The mother listens intently as Judge Lauren Lake explains that the court expects cooperation, not competition. She stresses that children should never be used as leverage or proof of loyalty. This moment underscores why the Truth Changes Everything podcast resonates so strongly, because truth strips away manipulation and forces honest engagement with reality. The defendant acknowledges his role in creating confusion through inconsistent behavior and conflicting relationships. While his admission does not erase past actions, it marks a turning point. Judge Lauren Lake emphasizes that accountability begins with acceptance. Without it, legal compliance becomes hollow and ineffective. The court also reflects on the misuse of private DNA tests and the dangers of relying on unverified results. Judge Lauren Lake explains that proper procedure exists to protect all parties involved. This clarification reinforces why many DNA test cheating stories end in court, because shortcuts often lead to deeper conflict rather than resolution. As proceedings draw closer to conclusion, Judge Lauren Lake offers final guidance. She urges all parties to seek counseling, mediation, and educational resources focused on healthy co-parenting. Her message mirrors the recovery-focused approach discussed in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where growth begins with acknowledgement and sustained effort. The courtroom, once filled with accusation and defensiveness, grows quieter. The reality of the situation has settled in. Relationships may be fractured, but clarity has been achieved. The judge reiterates that while the court cannot repair emotional damage, it can provide a legal framework that supports stability and fairness. This portion of the case highlights a critical truth. Evidence does not exist in isolation. It interacts with human lives, reshaping identities and futures. The evidence stage in divorce case proceedings often reveals not just facts, but patterns of behavior that must be addressed for healing to occur. Judge Lauren Lake concludes by reminding everyone present that justice is not about proving someone wrong, but about ensuring children are protected and supported. The law serves as a guidepost, not a weapon. Her final remarks reinforce the delicate balance between compassion and accountability that defines family court. As the parties leave the courtroom, the outcomes remain clear, even if emotions remain unresolved. DNA has spoken. Responsibility has been assigned. The truth, once hidden behind doubt and denial, now stands firmly in the open. And with that truth comes the opportunity, if not the guarantee, for change. As the case reaches its conclusion, Judge Lauren Lake brings the focus firmly back to the children, reminding everyone in the courtroom that legal truth exists to serve human lives, not to inflame conflict. The DNA results have already rewritten the narrative, and now the court's responsibility is to ensure that the consequences of those results lead to structure rather than chaos. This final phase of the proceedings reflects why so many viewers relate to cases where people regret taking a DNA test, yet later admit that the truth changes everything. Judge Lauren Lake explains that the court has now established biological facts, but facts alone do not resolve emotional damage. She stresses that continued denial or resentment will only prolong harm. Her guidance reflects the broader concept of justice in jurisprudence, where justice is not limited to verdicts, but extends to the practical and ethical outcomes of those decisions. The court's role is to stabilize what has been destabilized by uncertainty. Attention turns once again to the biological father, now legally confirmed. Judge Lauren Lake makes it clear that acknowledgement must be followed by action. Child support obligations, consistent involvement, and respect for co-parenting boundaries are not optional. These expectations align with Supreme Court child support standards, which exist to protect children from the consequences of adult behavior. The courtroom understands that responsibility delayed is still responsibility owed. The mother is reminded that while the court validates her pursuit of truth, healing will require restraint and cooperation. Judge Lauren Lake explains that using court outcomes as emotional leverage undermines the very stability she sought. This moment reflects lessons often shared in the Divorce Course podcast, where emotional closure is separated from legal resolution. The law can decide facts, but peace requires discipline beyond the courtroom. The man who acted as a father without biological ties listens quietly as the judge acknowledges his emotional contribution. Judge Lauren Lake explains that while the court cannot assign legal paternity where biology does not exist, it does not erase the emotional reality of his role. This echoes themes found in adoption stories' full episodes, where love, care, and presence matter deeply, even when the law draws boundaries. The court encourages respectful transition that prioritize the child's emotional security. Judge Lauren Lake then addresses the broader pattern revealed throughout the testimony: overlapping relationships, unclear boundaries, and inconsistent honesty. She explains that these patterns are not rare, but they are destructive. Referencing principles often discussed in the Relationship Between Law and Justice podcast, she clarifies that justice is compromised when adults refuse to act responsibly with one another. The courtroom becomes a place of correction because personal accountability failed outside of it. The discussion briefly returns to the issue of evidence handling. Judge Lauren Lake emphasizes why private DNA tests so often lead to conflict and confusion. Without proper oversight, such tests invite claims of manipulation and raise adverse inference in Evidence Act concerns. The court reiterates that certified testing exists to protect all parties and ensure fairness. This explanation reinforces why many DNA test cheating stories escalate into legal battles rather than resolution. As emotions surface one last time, Judge Lauren Lake pauses the proceedings to speak candidly. She reminds everyone that the children involved did not choose the circumstances of their birth. They did not choose uncertainty, conflict, or public scrutiny. The law steps in precisely because children cannot protect their own interests. This perspective aligns with themes frequently explored in the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where family law is described as one of the most morally demanding areas of legal practice. The judge also highlights how repeated court appearances, arguments, and unresolved resentment create long-term damage. She urges the adults to seek counseling, mediation, and parenting education, referencing recovery-based approaches similar to those discussed in Celebrate Recovery testimonies. Healing, she explains, is not a single decision but a continuous commitment to better choices. In her final remarks to the biological father, Judge Lauren Lake emphasizes that stepping up means more than financial compliance. Presence, consistency, and respect are essential. She warns that disappearing emotionally while complying legally still leaves harm behind. The courtroom understands that fatherhood, once confirmed, cannot be selectively accepted. This moment reinforces why the Truth Changes Everything podcast resonates with audiences. It captures the irreversible nature of truth once revealed. Turning to the mother, the judge acknowledges her perseverance but cautions against allowing bitterness to define the future. Judge Lauren Lake explains that children absorb emotional climates, not legal transcripts. Cooperation, not conflict, will shape their understanding of family and security. Her words reflect the balance between empathy and firmness that defines effective judicial leadership. The courtroom grows quieter as the weight of the proceedings settles in. There is no celebration, no victory, only clarity. DNA evidence has ended speculation, but it has also exposed the cost of prolonged uncertainty. This outcome mirrors countless cases discussed across platforms like the Divorce Course podcast and relationship-focused legal discussions, where closure arrives without comfort. Judge Lauren Lake concludes by reiterating that the law does not exist to punish mistakes, but to prevent their consequences from multiplying. She reminds everyone that while adults may move on, children carry experiences forward. The responsibility now lies with those standing before the court to ensure that truth becomes a foundation for stability rather than a source of ongoing conflict. As the parties prepare to leave, the final reality is clear. The court has spoken. Biology has been established. Legal responsibility has been assigned. But the real test lies beyond the courtroom doors. Whether this truth leads to healing or continued division depends on the choices made afterward. This case stands as a powerful example of how the evidence stage in divorce case, like proceedings, can transform lives. It shows how law intersects with emotion, how justice demands accountability, and how clarity, no matter how painful, creates the only path forward. In the end, the message is unmistakable. Truth may arrive late, but once it does, it leaves no room for denial.